Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the What the Fantasy Football Show. Got a lot of great things to cover tonight as we head into Week 5. Lots of things going on in the news, a lot of players practicing that we're hoping to get back this week. But before we get to all of that, first of all, I got to tell you that we're part of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, growing each and every day. Lots of great information out there. Check us out on fulltimefantasy.com. All the different podcasts are listed there. You can listen to them all and enjoy all the great information. But right now, I got to bring on the man that, started my career in this business and keeps it going each and every year. And that is the one, the only Mr. Tony Cincotta.
Well, Jim, thanks for the great introduction, but there's got to be times then, based on that you absolutely hate me, and I'm sure the same goes with Mike Blewitt for getting you stuck in this type of situation. It's good. It's great. But there are times, Jim, when you must say, what the hell am I doing?
It's always those times, Tony, and not just for fantasy football either, but always those times.
Yeah, we got Mike Blue with us. Mike, you ready and rearing to go? 25% of the fantasy football season is already gone. It goes by so fast, it reminds me of a sexual experience.
Well, my apologies to your former partners in those escapades, but hopefully we can make it last a little longer and increase or reduce your refractory period.
Oh, nice.
I got to be honest with people, and this is crazy, and this is not in my show notes. When I was with a woman, when I was in my teenage years, I used to always think of Chan Ho Park, who was pitching for the Texas Rangers or the LA Dodgers, or Hideki Matsui, as I had sex with other women to try, and that would keep me from ending the process before.
You're shaving about 15 years off your age minimum there, my friend.
I was going to say.
Hideki Matsui. Hideo Nomo at best. Nomo at best.
No, it was definitely Hideki Matsui in one of those, so maybe it wasn't 17. Jim, maybe, you never know, Jim. You never know. Things get a little fuzzy as you get older.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. For me, it was always you.
Well, that's a good call. You got to do what you got to do. In last week's show, we were talking a little bit about Peyton Barber, and we were talking, Jim said the emphasis on Peyton Barber was that basically he's a 10-point per game player with no upside and has to get in the end zone. So what did I do this week? I go and look at guys under 10 points, and I'm going to ask Jim and Mike, in a 1-point PPR league, the following running backs are under 10 points per game. Which running back do you see coming out of this mess first? Joe Mixon, Cincinnati Bengals, averaging 9.28 fantasy points right now. Carlos Hyde is averaging 9.20 fantasy points. Tariq Cohen, 7.90. Miles Sanders, 7.80. Duke Johnson, who a lot of people fell in love with after the trade, 7.58. And last but not least, Sony Michel, 7.08. So it's Sony Michel, Duke Johnson, Tevin Coleman, Miles Sanders, Tariq Cohen, Carlos Hyde, and Joe Mixon. Jim, any of these guys going to get over that 10-point range for us?
Yeah, I think Joe Mixon is going to be the first out of that. Look, he's definitely settled into a bad range and has not gotten going well at all. But the last couple of weeks, we've seen a little bit of life. Week 3, he had over 17 points. Week 4, got it to double digits just barely. But there's a little bit of life. The problem with Mixon is, of course, his O-line is decimated by injuries, and they just can't seem to get anything going behind it. But Mixon is too talented. He'll find his own way.
I'll tell you what, he is talented. After watching that Pittsburgh game, as everybody out there, is it only being the only game, that offensive line is so bad. Terrible. I started getting concerned about, hell, I have a lot of Tyler Boyd on a lot of teams. Mike, who do you think comes out of this mix? As Jim mentioned, he thinks it's going to be the Cincinnati Bengals running back Joe Mixon. Anyone else you see coming out of this mix?
I mean, there is a really common thread amongst all those players in that their offensive lines are struggling. The Texans obviously are sharing the ball, so Duke and Carlos Hyde are sort of eating into each other's points. Mixon is by far the most talented of this group, but I guess I'll pick another player for the sake of argument, in that I think people are pushing the panic button on Sony Michel early. And while the Pats' offensive line is having issues at the moment, I do feel like back half of the season, Michel is a guy that you're going to want. I wouldn't be surprised if the back half of this season, mirrors the back half of last season when he really got on a roll. They got some offensive line continuity and started to fix it. But I think he might have some tough weeks before that happens.
This week's got to be a good week for him against the Washington Redskins. If something's going to hop out there, especially you have Josh Gordon, who was a limited participant. Rex Burkhead's a little banged up. So you'd think it would be the Sony Michel show this week for people.
See, that's the problem. You try to put rational thought to New England running backs. We may see a lot of Brandon Bolden this week.
Yeah, I'll tell you what.
Scored last week.
Yeah, he got in the end zone. So you never know. I'm going to turn the question around. Joe Mixon, Carlos Hyde. We went with Tariq Cohen, Miles Sanders, Duke Johnson, Sony Michel. I'll throw out our man Joe Mixon. Which one is the one you want to least own, Jim, out of that group?
Tariq Cohen. Just because Matt Nagy is he's just being an idiot as a coach at this point. He's trying to be too cute with his running backs. He's not using them the correct way. Look, Cohen did great in week 1 when they used him as a slot receiver. Now that they've thrown him back into the backfield mix, he is part of the mix. And none of them are really exploding for fantasy. Not that Chicago cares about what they're doing for fantasy because they're winning and doing what they need to do. But at the same time, for us, it really kills us. And it's so hard to trust any of these guys getting enough work to do anything.
What's your thoughts, Mike, as far as one guy that you don't want to own out of that group?
I'm very concerned about Cohen, as Jim is. I think with Coleman and Sanders, and to some extent even the Texans' backfield, I think those guys are going to be mired in committees all year. It doesn't really matter to me how talented we think Miles Sanders is. Jordan Howard is actually doing a pretty good job. And I think Peterson has shown his penchant for mixing it up regardless of who is in there in the backfield. So Sanders, you're just never going to know. And Cohen is like this too. You'll never know when to play them. You'll never know. You'll get it wrong.
Sanders, to me, is the most frustrating.
Yeah.
I think, like all of us agree, this is a very talented running back. But Jordan Howard's a guy that's playing well. He's played well in the past, and he's getting the ball at the goal line. So I think at best you're looking at Sanders getting the ball from the 20 to 20. And Howard can catch the ball in the backfield as well.
Well, he did last week. It kind of surprised everybody, including the defense, when they saw him running in for a touchdown on that wheel route. Look, the other problem with Miles Sanders is he still has some issues as a rookie. He still is learning how to pick up a blitz, how to read the defense, know which guy to go after. He's also, he's got this issue of putting the ball on the ground, something he did in college. Those are the kind of things that really, limit your upside as a rookie running back. He needs to work on those things and work on those things a lot. One of the other problems he has is he likes to dance a little too much behind the line of scrimmage. And he doesn't have the talent or the speed to really be able to do that and pull it off.
There's a couple of guys, by the way, Tony, in this conversation. Jordan Howard became part of this conversation, and Carlos Hyde, who were besieged, I would say, by the fantasy football cognoscenti, the people that seem to know all about the analytical part of these players. And I do feel like it was very heavy-handed because Carlos Hyde and Jordan Howard, despite being traded, are showing themselves to at least be valuable parts of their offenses, even if they're a little less efficient than some people would like. Those two players are still valuable on some level, and some people cast them off just because they don't like them or because their stats historically have not led them to be an efficient runner.
For all the people out there, we're going to switch over to the quarterback position. I got two big things here. First off, the number 3 fantasy quarterback comes from a team that we thought would run the ball. A team, number 4 fantasy quarterback, comes from a team we thought would run the ball. Number 6 fantasy quarterback comes from a team that will run the ball. Russell Wilson, the number 3 fantasy quarterback, 25% of the season gone. Dak Prescott at number 4, and at number 6, Matthew Stafford. Jim, can these 3 guys keep up what they're doing through 25% of the season, and should fantasy owners expect this to go downhill?
Well, really, we'll start with Russell Wilson. With Wilson, they do want to run the ball, and they have been running the ball. But when they get behind, they throw everything at Wilson and say, okay, it's your turn. you go win the game for us. And that's, usually what he does. And he does it quite well. But, it's hard to count on him, each and every week, like we saw in week 4 against the Cardinals. Looked like a prime matchup. He goes out and completes 22 of 28 passes, but only for 240 yards and only 1 touchdown. And he didn't add anything on the ground. He had 2 rushes for 7 yards. So, you're going to get those games as well from him. But I like him better when they're going against tougher defenses, because a lot of times they're going to have to rely on him more against those tough defenses than they will with the running game.
That's a good call. You don't hear that too much with fantasy people telling you to go against a tougher defense, but it's hard to disagree, because what Seattle does is they run the ball, and it limits the amount of throws of Russell Wilson there. Mike, what's your thoughts on these 3 quarterbacks that were supposedly thought to be on running teams coming by, and can they keep it up?
Yeah, I think there's the 2 guys that jump out to me. Well, first of all, Russell Wilson was remarkably efficient last year, so it was easy to call a regression on that. But here we are, and he's still in the mix. I guess early in the season, even though Sunday night wasn't great, I guess we could say that Dak has really been impressive. Granted, it was against the Giants in Washington and Miami. Those are not 3 stout defenses, but Dak did play well, surprisingly well in a couple of those games. The other one is Stafford, because it doesn't matter what we think of Stafford as a player and as a QB. I think we would all agree he's talented, but it seemed to be that this team was going the way of Kerryon Johnson, and they were really last year grinding heavily towards a run-oriented offense. And now here we are. And granted, he doesn't have quite as many pass attempts as somebody like Pat Mahomes, obviously, but he's thrown 141 passes through these 4 games. He's 9 touchdowns to 2 picks. So I'd have to give credit. Surprisingly, 54 rushing yards, too. It's got to be a record through 4 games for Matt Stafford. But I would say that I'm surprised that he's thrown the ball as much as he has, over 30 attempts in all 4 games so far. Maybe not record-breaking, but just a little bit surprising, considering I thought they would be far run heavier.
It's real interesting. And what's really interesting is the number 12 quarterback, which would signify him being a starting quarterback in your fantasy league, is a guy that 50% of the people out there thought would lose his job before the season started. Number 12 fantasy quarterback right now is Marcus Mariota of the Tennessee Titans. And I'm going to put it in perspective for you. Marcus Mariota is number 12. Tom Brady's number 13, and Aaron Rodgers is number 16. Jim, any hopes of Mariota having more fantasy points than Brady or Rodgers at season's end?
No, I really don't. Look, we did get to see a good Mariota this week against the Falcons in Atlanta. He came out, he played well, didn't throw for a lot of yardage, but he was very efficient with those 3 touchdowns on only 18 completions. So you got to love that. A.J. Brown gave him a nice little target for a couple of those touchdowns. Hopefully that trend continues, because I really like A.J. Brown.
He's good.
And they even got Corey Davis involved for the first time all year, so that was good. But, the next 2 weeks they play the Bills at home, and then they go to Denver to play the Broncos. Those 2 games are going to be tough for him. They're definitely harder matchups at this point than any he's faced so far. But that's the problem with Mariota. I mean, you get some really good games, and then you get some really down games. And, the week before at Jacksonville, he throws for 304 yards but doesn't throw a touchdown. So you just never know what you're going to get at him. He's so inconsistent, it's hard to count on him.
What's your thoughts, Mike? Any chance Mariota beats out Rodgers or Brady in fantasy points this season?
I would bet against, but I think there's a chance, just because Brady didn't really finish very high on fantasy lists last year at all, especially if they get run heavy towards the end of the season. He may not just have as many passing touchdown opportunities. Jim is right in that there has been inconsistency out of Mariota, but that also is reflective of the team. This team is very inconsistent, talented but inconsistent. I just hope, and I have said this on air before, that we put to put to rest the idea that like Tannehill's going to swoop in and take his job. These next 2 weeks, I think Jim is right. They could be a little rough, but it doesn't mean the Titans are going to go 0-2. It's just that he may not be your favorite fantasy quarterback. Hell, I started him in Scott Fishbowl the other day, and it was the best move I made all week.
There you have it. Well, folks, if you weren't paying attention, the New York Giants, Eli Manning's out of a job, and he's been sitting watching the last 2 games, which the Giants have become victorious. Yet, Eli Manning is a half a point better than Baker Mayfield in fantasy points this season. Baker Mayfield at 17.34. I told you the 12th quarterback was Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota is averaging 24 fantasy points, almost 25. So 8 points behind Marcus Mariota is Baker Mayfield. Jim, he's got 2 stud wide receivers, but he's got a running game that looks pretty good when they use it. Jim, what do you see Mayfield? Does he finish in the top 12 quarterbacks?
Man, he's got the talent. He showed it last year, but this year, that offensive line is playing poorly. They're just not doing anything to keep him safe. But at the same time, he's gotten so afraid of that offensive line that even when they do give him a pocket, he's not staying in it. He's got happy feet, and he's trying to get out of it as soon as he can, and that's when it leads him to make mistakes. So he's got to get back into being able to sit in that pocket and make those throws, and we're just not seeing that right now.
What's your thoughts on Baker Mayfield, Mike? Does he rebound and finish in the top 12? I mean, some leagues, he was the 4th quarterback off the board.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of wood to chop, so fortunately, he gets to play the Bengals a couple of times. He's got Miami. He's got Arizona. So he's got some games where he can make it up. And clearly, the guys that are in the top 12 now aren't going to make it through the end of the season as the top 12. Some of those guys will drop down. We expect Dak to probably regress some because they won't be throwing the ball as much.
I don't agree with that at all.
What I just think I don't think he's going to stay top 5 with Dak. It doesn't mean that he can plummet out of the top 12. I'm just saying I don't think he retains his lofty status that he has right now. But he could beat out Baker.
Well, they get Gallup back this week, maybe back this week, and now I don't know what happened Sunday, but this past week was the worst play calling game of the season for Kellen Moore. I don't know what he was thinking. He didn't use play action pass. He only did it 7 times in the game. And he was successful with those 7 times. 6 out of 7 passes were completed, but that was the lowest, play action pass they've done all year. There was the highest percentage of runs on first down they've done all year. It was almost like he regressed entirely back to 2018 in this one game.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sean Payton showed the rookie offensive coordinator who was boss there.
That was a stupid idea by Sean Payton.
I'm saying effective counter game planning by Sean Payton and the Saints defensive staff. But Baker, going back to Baker, I think as these stories normally come out, it gets a little heavy-handed. I think a lot of people did agree with Rex Ryan's commentary on him being a one-read quarterback, and he is getting happy feet. It is a function of the offensive line. But Freddie Kitchens, I do think, has found a way to be an effective play caller in the past for Baker. I just think Kitchens is struggling with running the whole show right now. I'll say Baker is around the top 12, but maybe finishes just outside of it, which is why I wouldn't have proposed drafting him that highly in the first place.
And I did.
What's interesting is you got Baker Mayfield, but a lot of fantasy owners are being affected by the lack of performance or the poor performance of Minnesota quarterback Kirk Cousins.
Wait. Before we go to Kirk Cousins, so I got to ask you guys one thing about Cleveland. How much longer do you think it'll be before Odell Beckham implodes?
I think he's going to be a good citizen. He was last year with the Giants for the most part. I don't think it's going to be a scenario there. He's got one of his good buddies on the team in Jarvis Landry. I don't think this team is going to completely fall apart. I don't know that I'd have him in the playoffs, but I don't think it's going to spiral out of control. Could get a little rough here. They're at the Niners, Seattle, bye week, at New England, at Denver. It's not an easy month right there. Then they got the Bills, Steelers. They might come out of these next 6 like 3-3, and they're going to be staring at a 5-5 record, and then we'll see what they're made of.
And Beckham's going to implode.
I don't think he implodes, and I think they go 8-8.
Yeah,
I think he's a little craziness. Freddie Kitchens is going to sit there and turn his back to some of the things. But 8-8, it's crazy right now. The way the AFC's shaping up, 8-8 might get them in.
You're right.
It's crazy, crazy, crazy. Fantasy owners: Stefan Diggs, Adam Thielen, not playing well, but it's all falling on the quarterback, making all the cash. I'll tell you what, Adam Thielen, you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Jim, he's getting harder to put in a lineup every week.
He is getting harder. This whole situation is tough, and I love this one stat I got off of Twitter. Look, Minnesota has Kirk Cousins invested $84 million in him for 3 years. Stephon Diggs, $81 million for 5 years. Adam Thielen, $64 million for 4 years. Meanwhile, they're 31st in passing yards per game and 32nd in passing first downs per game. Obviously, the front office doesn't know what they want to do.
And
they bring in a coach
Diggs,
that wants to run
ahead,
like
Jim.
crazy.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike, but they bring in a coach that wants to run like crazy when all his money is invested in the passing game.
And Stephon Diggs missed practice today for non-injury reasons. So
I didn't see that.
The plot thickens. So we don't know.
Could they trade him?
Yeah, people are obviously speculating that he's going to New England because they tried to trade for a high-profile wide receiver. But I was thinking about. I'm glad you asked about Cousins because I was thinking about him today. He's in the second year of this $84 million fully guaranteed contract. We'll see obviously how this plays out. But after this contract finishes up, do you think he starts another game in the NFL?
Not unless he turns it around big time. If he keeps playing like this. Yeah, if he keeps playing like this, he's got $84 million. He's okay with that.
He's got like 144 over the life of that,
true.
And what Washington paid him. So he may finish up this contract and then not have an opportunity to start another game.
But here's the thing. I think that he could not start another game, but it's not because he's not one of the top 30 quarterbacks. It's just a team that has no quarterback is not going to put a 30-something-year-old back there because you look around the NFL now.
Well, that's the way it works,
right? Yeah. Miami, he could obviously play there.
Yeah.
Buffalo, I could make the argument he could play there.
Whoa, it's a shot across the bow. You want to get it to Josh Allen now?
Well, I mean, if you watch the first half of that game before the concussion, he did everything he could to keep the Patriots in the game. I thought he was wearing a white jersey.
Yeah, well, I mean, welcome to playing against Belichick. I don't think that was a tough call.
Yeah, but if you're in a first-round draft pick, right, and you got that team, and you could put the coaching staff here, but this guy seemed to be throwing the ball downfield wherever he could, and every time they went back to the bench, the offensive coordinator was going at him. I think he was just hucking it up.
I just think the defense just confused the heck out of him. Belichick probably threw all kinds of things at him that he hadn't seen before. He didn't know what to expect, and that's what I would expect for him to do against a young quarterback. You got to remember, though, that at the same time he was doing that, at the same time the Bills defense just shut Brady down.
Yeah, it did. But Tony, I'd say the primary reason that Brian Daboll, the offensive coordinator, is going at him is because he used to be on New England's staff. I'm sure he knew at least some of the things that were going to be thrown at Allen, and he didn't execute. So we all have question marks about Allen. From a fantasy standpoint, he can be really valuable. It doesn't mean that we're all on board with him as a long-term NFL quarterback. There's accuracy issues. This wide receiving core has been better early than we anticipated, but the other day was a really bad game. I'm not going to throw him completely under the bus yet.
I will throw him completely under the bus, but I want to take two games that happened that weekend with Jared Goff, who played a poor game but threw for 500 yards. He's got a better cast around him. But he's got offensive line issues as well.
Yeah.
And either it's the coaching or the guy just can't play, that those two guys played bad games, but you look like Jared Goff tons and tons ahead of him.
Well, I think I think Goff has proven himself as much grief as everybody gives Jared Goff. I think he's proven himself to be capable in big scenarios. And you can throw the Super Bowl at him where he played terribly, but the NFC Championship game against the Saints, he was awesome because they were down in that game and he could have folded like a rag doll and he didn't. And I thought that was Goff's best game as a pro. And the other day, he went toe-to-toe. He is having offensive line issues. His defense sold him out on Sunday, and then he's got to bounce back. And tomorrow night, we'll see what he has in Seattle. That's a tough assignment to come back from after throwing the ball 60-something times, 68 times, 63 times, can't remember. But 517, and it wasn't his fault. It was all the defense. And that offensive line is an issue. Roger Saffold leaving to go to Tennessee and John Sullivan effectively retiring is hurting them. They can't run the ball. They can't run the ball. They have offensive line issues. And now there's a lot of reasons that people were fading the Rams. And it wasn't just Super Bowl hangover. They lost some key people. And the Gurley question, which obviously was unanswered, is starting to look more and more like he may not be the same guy. The other day, what are you going to do? They were down. They had to throw it. So he didn't get the ball much. But he at least did some in the passing game. Gurley did.
I'll tell you
scored
what.
2 touchdowns.
Yeah. I actually picked the Rams. I thought they were the most complete team. But we're seeing, Jim, more and more teams, offensive line issues early in the season.
Crazy.
Do you see it getting better as the year goes on? Because we do have the situation where nobody's playing in preseason anymore, right? So maybe take a couple games to get here in week 4. Leon Searcy does some radio work out here, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, their running game for the first 3 games was anemic, to say the least. That's being kind. And then Fournette goes off for 200 yards. And his take was, they don't play in preseason. Just keep running the ball, keep running the ball, keep running the ball. And he said if they stick with it, the offensive line will get cohesive and they'll put it together. He had talked to other people in the league, and they said the same thing. They're just not getting enough reps.
Oh, and I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, this is crazy because this was a good offensive line last year. But like Mike said, they lost a couple of key components. Right now, Pro Football Focus has them ranked through 4 games as the 30th offensive line, 30th ranked offensive line. So, I mean, they're literally not getting it done. And a lot of that does come down to, you know, you need time to play with the other offensive linemen. You need to know what they're going to do in any given situation. And only time gives you that. Experience gives you that. And we see that more and more. You know, we see a lot of offensive linemen change hands in the offseason. And I don't care how good they are. You go to a new team with different players around you, and it takes time to develop. That's just the nature of the beast. I think that not playing in preseason, all of that stuff, I think really does hurt them. I think, you know, next year we'll probably see a lot more of team practices where they play against another team in practice and do a lot of this stuff in practice as opposed to do it in the preseason games.
Mike, final thoughts on the offensive line play thus far. I mean, a lot of the big teams, that's their problem. Do we see it get better as we saw in Jacksonville last week 4?
I do think that you guys have touched on a key point. Continuity amongst offensive lines is often as important as the overall talent level of those offensive lines. I very often think back to the New York Giants teams in the previous decade where they played those guys. Maybe none of them will go to the Hall of Fame, but they played consistently together. Reggie McKenzie, Sean O'Hara, David Deal, and others. Rich Seibert, that was an offensive line that really did a lot of work for Eli and kept him clean. And they aren't Hall of Fame names. I do think that works on a macro level and on a micro level from season to season. Leon Searcy's right in saying that they don't get enough reps together. So in live game situations, it looks like it looked like that opening night Bears Packers where the offensive linemen were lost on both sides of the ball. I think we're seeing a similar pattern to that through the first 4 weeks, and it will continue to get better, although it wouldn't surprise me if teams like the Rams, who are 30th, Jim, I'd imagine Miami and Cincinnati are probably 31 or 32 or thereabouts.
I believe so, yes.
Will continue to be the worst. I think Miami and Cincinnati obviously has some injury issues, but not all of them will be fixed this year. Miami has virtually no chance to pull themselves out of it because they don't have a talent pool to pull from.
Well, I'm looking at Twitter, and there's a trade rumor out there floated by a guy that just made it up because we used to work with him, Nando DeFino of the Athletic, and he's citing that Stephon Diggs could be going to Jacksonville for Jalen Ramsey because Diggs played for John Filippo before. What's your thoughts, Jim? Stephon Diggs for Jalen Ramsey?
Well, look, I think that would benefit both sides. Definitely gives Minnesota a killer defensive backfield at that point. Anybody that Ramsey goes to definitely improves a ton just getting him. And, Diggs at this point probably going to be happy to go anywhere else. And right now, going to Jacksonville with my guy Gardner Minshew, not a bad place to be. Gardner Minshew does have no compunction about throwing the ball down the field, and he's very accurate. So that would play right into Diggs' hands.
You think this could happen, Mike? Is this Nando DeFino onto something?
Is he on something or on something?
Either one.
Either one. I don't think that happens. I don't know that the Vikings can necessarily. I mean, I don't know that the Vikings are going to pull that off. I also would say, I actually think, and you guys may disagree, that Jacksonville would be looking for more than just.
Oh, they would. They would. I would think they would want a number one pick with it.
Yeah, they'd want a lot for it, and I don't know that Minnesota's willing to do it.
So there you have it.
It would be nice for people who own Diggs.
Get fired up about that. Real quick, what Jim touched on the preseason. I saw something out there this week that the owners are proposing no preseason games, a 17-game schedule, and 2 bye weeks. Jim, how would that suit you?
17-game schedule with 2 bye weeks. That's going to be interesting to say the least, because I know when they were floating the 18-game season idea out there, they were also floating the idea that players could only play in 16 of them so that they wouldn't have to put asterisks next to every record for forever here. So it would be interesting to see if they did that with a 17-game season as well. And if they did, that would make the logistics of fantasy ownership a lot harder. Trying to figure out which guy's going to play each and every week might be tough.
You know what's crazy is that they even would consider records, because they've changed the rules so much in the NFL that every passing record is going to be broken.
QB records don't matter anymore.
And no running back record is going to ever be broken with all these committees.
Roger Staubach retired with the highest passer rating. Yeah, Roger Staubach retired with the highest passer rating of all time, and it was, I believe, it was 89 when he retired, and that would get him fired now immediately. So it says a lot about how the stats have changed. As far as, I just don't think that. I actually am surprised to hear. I shouldn't say surprised, but the NFL would really screw up their fans by doing something like that. The amount of people that play fantasy football and wager on games, for them to now have to adjust with high-profile players sitting out games like that would be a disaster. As far as going no preseason games, and let's just say they played 17 games straight up with 2 bye weeks, I still think we're going to have the issues that we were just talking about on the previous topic. Guys not getting reps. I think the football will be sloppy for the first 4 and 5 weeks.
Yep.
Jim, would you guys be okay with that? Jim, you first. It would be really sloppy to start the season.
Yeah, I think it would absolutely be. But again, I think they would go to, team-on-team practices a lot more so that they're not only against their own guys. So I think that would come into play a lot if they do something like that.
I agree with you.
But I still think that does affect how they get started, because you still – look, if you're going to play them that much in a practice, why not have the preseason game?
Right.
So it doesn't make any sense that way to me.
I totally agree with that point.
Yeah, it's like it does. If you're going to do one, why not do the other?
Yeah,
at least you get paid for preseason games. You're not getting paid for practices.
It's gonna hurt. It's definitely gonna hurt the play, because they're gonna get together maybe once or twice with scrimmages. Plus, when you get in the scrimmages too, just like the preseason games, you don't run your plays because you don't want to show anybody anything. So it's kind of crazy, anyways, that you're gonna do something different than you're gonna do in the regular season.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get that whole thing. It's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. But the one thing I do know is that the way it's situated now, I think we're stuck with having the first few weeks being rough every year.
All right, wide receivers. I'm going to throw out Deshaun Jackson, who's actually number one points per game because of injuries, but Keenan Allen's the number one wide 0.38. Cooper Kupp, 22.30. Chris Godwin is next. And then Terry McLaurin is next for the Washington Redskins. Of course, he missed last week with an injury there. Cooper Kupp is interesting coming back with that Rams offense. We talked about the poor offensive line. They have two other wide receivers there. Jim, I think everybody expected Kupp to be a guy. He was going in the third or fourth round and be a decent player, but is there any chance he could have elite fantasy numbers at the end of the season? I mean, he is a guy that plays out of the slot, catches balls all over the place. Can he keep this up for the entire year?
Look, this is a guy that averages over 10 targets a game, so absolutely he can. You know, even though they have three good wide receivers, Kupp has shown, even last year when he was healthy, that he is the top guy for Goff. Goff trusts him. He goes to him a lot. And, you know, in the last 2 weeks, we've seen 20 catches for, I think 120 yards somewhere around there and 3 touchdowns just in the last 2 weeks alone. And even the week before that, he had 5 for 120 against the Saints. So the only bad game he had was week 1, and he still had 7 receptions for 46 yards. In PPR league, still got you double digits. I think Goff has that kind of talent. If he could stay healthy for all 16 games, he could put up monster numbers all year long.
I'd be buying
Mike, Sterling Shepard is the 13th wide receiver. Actually, buying Jared Goff.
Yeah. I think these rushing issues are going to be a part of this team for the entirety of the year, and I think they're going to throw more than they're comfortable with. But it means fantasy points for Jared Goff.
And we always like fantasy points. I tell people all the time, man, it doesn't matter who's the best, who's not the best. It's all about attempts. Yeah. All the time you have the ball in your hands. That's what fantasy's about. Sterling Shepard's the 13th wide receiver, Mike. Golden Tate is coming back for all you people out there that are not paying attention, coming back for his 4-game suspension. Does this impact Shepard, and what are your fantasy prospects for Golden Tate?
I think Golden Tate is going to be a difficult guy to figure out because now they've shifted over to Daniel Jones and Tate is coming into a new team. It's a new offense. It's a new quarterback. So for me to try to extrapolate as to what Golden Tate is going to do, I think is difficult. I would buy the fact that Shepard will remain fairly consistent over the long haul. You should temper expectations perhaps slightly on Shepard, but he's still the guy I'd want to have in this offense as a pass catcher, more so than any of the other options.
Now, can I just jump in, Mike? The one thing I will say to that about Tate coming in with Daniel Jones is these two probably worked together a lot in practice and in the preseason because neither one was getting first-team reps because they weren't giving Tate the first-team reps because they knew they weren't going to be around for the first 4 weeks. Yeah. So they could have been working out a lot. I'm not saying they did. I don't know for sure. Yeah. But my guess would be that they were probably on the field a lot together during those times.
I think it's a fair caveat. I do think because of all of the factors with Tate, I think he's a difficult guy to try to figure out.
Well, he is. Exactly where he's Look how bad he was last year with Philadelphia. I mean, they didn't use him correctly, but still.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you guys, this WTF fantasy show, we're all about morality here. We're all about doing the right thing. Right. So I'm going to ask a question. Yeah,
sometimes I do the left thing just so it's a different date.
I might put this poll on Twitter lately and find out what America's thinking. So if you want to chime in at the Tony Cincotta, if you're playing a fantasy matchup this week, right, and say Thursday night you get the lineups or you get the lineups Friday, and you notice that your opponent has Antonio Brown in the lineup instead of A.J. Brown, Mike, do you let him know?
No.
No. What do you mean you don't let him know?
No. Why? I mean, that's not morality. That's him. That's his stupidity. He shouldn't be competing in fantasy football. I mean, I'm not going to. No, I would never do that.
I'll go one better. Oh, hell no.
Hell no.
Not even close. Boy's on his own.
Yeah, you're on your own, my friend. I had a cold last week, and it was brutal, and I missed a whole bunch of waiver wire stuff. Nobody's crying in their beer for me. I almost got guillotined because of it, and I'm just happy to be alive.
So I'll take the one step further then.
Yeah.
The guy played A.J. Brown. You saw it. You didn't say anything. You win by 2 points. Do you put anything on the message board or send an email calling out the player's mistake, Mike?
I'd say there's a possibility I would do that. It would probably be a friends league. It's not going to be like Scott Fishbowl where I don't know the people themselves. I might do something like that. The only thing I would say from a morality standpoint is I wouldn't, in leagues, I do think you have to act honorably in that maybe offering players that are injured where, somebody that's maybe a little bit checked out in the league could accidentally accept because they're not up on the news cycle. I won't do stuff like that. I think that can get you into hot water.
I tend to be very even when I trade just because what I find is if I offer good trades that could help both sides, it's much easier to find a trade later on in the season.
I agree.
So, Jim, would you rub it in if you win by 2 and let them know that Antonio Brown no longer plays in the National Football League?
Well, again, if it was a friends league or family league, then yeah, absolutely I would. But, most of these other leagues where we don't really know the people that we're playing against, then no.
No, you let it go. You wouldn't go all Eric Weddle on the person?
No, I really wouldn't go all Eric Weddle on the person, no.
Hey, I don't know if people are paying attention, but there's some tight ends out there that are still on waiver wires, people, and you need to do a better job at grabbing some of these tight ends. And I'll ask these guys which one they would grab off the waiver wires in some of these leagues. And it's not any of the leagues I play in, but when you look at these percentages owned on ESPN and CBS and Yahoo, sometimes I shake my head. I see Will Disley on waiver wires, Delaney Walker on waiver wires, and I don't understand how you have 12 better tight ends in the league. What's your thoughts, Mike, and which one would you rather own?
Between Disley or Delaney Walker?
Yeah.
The fact that they traded Nick Vannett, I think, really entrenched Disley as a legit option for Russell Wilson. He's got 4 touchdowns already on the season. He's got more catches than Delaney Walker. As much as I was a proponent of drafting Delaney Walker because you were getting him at such value, I think they're pretty close to even. Walker's history is a lot better, but I just feel like Disley is maybe the trajectory is a little bit higher. They're not catching tons of passes, either of them, so there's still a lot of touchdown dependency, but I sort of like Disley's position right now in their offense.
Your thoughts, Jim?
I'm right there with Mike. I agree. I mean, I think Disley has more opportunity to score touchdowns than Walker will have. And look, this is the same thing Disley did last year. First 2 weeks he came in, scored touchdowns. Then he got banged up, and then he was out, missed the whole season. So it's obvious that Russell Wilson likes him as a red zone threat, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Like Mike said, I like Delaney Walker too. I have him in quite a few leagues, and I'm not, going away from him. But if I had the choice right now, it'd have to be Disley. He's on a really hot streak at this point.
Only a 1 target difference on the season between the two.
I actually have both on. I have both those tight ends on 2 teams, and I played Disley over Delaney Walker. The problem is they both have the same bye week either, so Delaney Walker is probably going to be hitting the waiver wire in my league, guys, after I just talked about him not belonging on the waiver wire. Another statistical situation that's crazy. Tight ends, the number 1 targeted tight end in football is a guy I think some of us thought would take a step back. That's Zach Ertz of the Philadelphia Eagles, because they're employing 2 tight ends in this offense. Yet, Jim, Ertz is still leading in targets with 38.
Well, you got to remember, for a good portion of that time, Dallas Goedert, the second tight end, was out. He finally got back last week and ended up catching a touchdown. Not much else, but he caught the touchdown. So a lot of that was factored in. So he's missed a good amount of time so far. I still think we see Goddard breaking out a little bit more as the season progresses. And, the one bad thing about Ertz is he hasn't scored yet.
Yeah, damn right he hasn't.
I
have Zach Ertz in a lot of places.
Spoken as Zach Ertz owner.
Hell yeah, I am.
Mike, I think a lot of people respect you and Jim as fantasy analysts, but neither one of you said that Darren Waller would take all of Antonio Brown's targets.
I certainly did not. I thought Tyrell Williams, I thought, would be the biggest beneficiary of it, but this is all Derek Carr, man. The guy does not like to push it downfield, and Darren Waller is in a perfect fantasy position right now. So
actually, I wouldn't say perfect.
All right, that's fair.
Finish your thought, and then I'll tell you.
Yeah,
why.
I was going to say he also hasn't scored, but Waller was a guy that was talked about, whether it was because of Hard Knocks or because we liked his potential position as a starting tight end in this offense. But nonetheless, props to anybody that picked him up a little bit later in drafts.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. All preseason they were raving about this kid, but we knew coming out of college he had a lot of talent. But then, of course, he got into doing some bad things off the field, and it hurt him for a couple of years. And he's finally back, and I'm glad for that. But the one thing that I don't like right now is that we finally saw the rookie Foster Moreau get involved last week, and he scored. And I wonder if he's going to start eating into Waller's, touches a little bit, targets here a little bit. Right now might be the perfect time to sell Waller if that's going to be the case.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, very, very interesting. For all the people out there, the target leaders are Zach Ertz, Evan Ingram, of course, who to me is the best tight end in football, Darren Waller, Austin Hooper, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews there. Jim, I look at Ingram, and it was crazy. They did a good job of taking him out of the game last week. He's got a tough matchup against Minnesota this week, but it's a guy that I'll tell you what, he reminds me of Kellen Winslow back when Winslow was healthy. Yeah,
I knew you were going to say that.
He's an athletic freak.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, he looks more like a wide receiver than he does a tight end.
Absolutely.
He's got those traits that you look for in a wide receiver as well. So, yeah.
Shannon Sharp thing.
Yeah, right. I like Ingram, and he's definitely going to be in play this year. And, but again, it's not going to be an every week type of thing, especially if Barkley comes back a little faster than is expected, like he's touting. I mean, he was even on the practice field today.
Yeah,
probably not doing a ton, but out there.
Yeah.
So, this is off of a week 3 high ankle sprain. In week 5, he's on the practice field already. He probably won't play this week, but he could very well play in week 6.
Yeah, the crazy thing is he was in full uniform. You don't let a guy go out in full uniform unless he's I would think. Joke. But, yeah, it's absolutely
like a RoboCop.
crazy. WTF Fantasy Football, there you have it for this week. Getting ready for week 5. As you guys, next week will be 33 a little less than 33%. I think 30.79% done of the season, Jim. And fantasy football is one of those fast-paced things, as we alluded to in the opening of the show.
Oh, absolutely. It goes so quick. We put so much effort into the preseason, getting ready for it. And then once the season hit, it seems like it just flies right past. The next thing you know, we'll be having turkey, looking at Turkey Day, watching Detroit lose. And, it's just the way it goes.
Watching Detroit lose, man. That's harsh. I'll tell you what, we don't have any time left in the show, but they were robbed the other day because I get the guy fumbled, but they could have blown a play dead for stopped forward progress there. But what happened, Jim, to the hometown getting a call there?
Well, that hometown is in New England.
WTF Fantasy Football, Jim, where can everybody find you this week?
Just find me on Twitter at FantasyTaz. You'll see everything I do.
And yourself, Mike Blewitt. I had a little coffee in my mouth.
Okay. As long as it was
sure,
coffee,
that's what you had in your mouth.
Yeah. As long as it's coffee.
I want to clarify for the mouth experts out there that knew that something was in there.
Well, you had a mono story for us last week, so you never know what we're going to cover here on WTF. So I'm at Mike Blewitt. You find me Sunday mornings on the Sports Grid TV network, and just find me on Twitter, and you'll see some of my appearances during the week on this podcast and others.
Yeah, myself, I'm going to go get tested for cancer this week. I don't believe I have cancer, but I have been tanning in the nude, Jim, so I just want to make sure that nothing's happening.
Oh, man, I'm so glad I don't have access to a satellite.
Jim, you want to get one of them drones?
No, I really don't, Tony.
Yeah.
WTF Fantasy Football.
You scared me away from them forever.